Okay, we're here. We've actually gained a lot of elevation, driving up through the foothills into a Larimer County open space. We're now at about 7,700 feet. And that means that we're out of that lower ecotone into a region of, into one of our first actual ecoregions. This is the lower montane zone, and that stretches from about 6,000 to 8,000 feet in elevation. So we're actually somewhat higher up in the lower montane zone at this point. The main tree species to be aware of here in the lower montane is sitting right behind me. This is a Ponderosa pine. Hopefully this is a tree that you've been pretty familiar with, you've seen before a little bit. A couple of things to note about it. Number one, you'll see that this is a pine tree. It's got long needles in bundles of 3 to 5. Has a pine cone that looks something like this. You may think that's no big deal, that just looks like a pine cone. We actually will be seeing some different types of pine cone. Believe me, this will be relevant later. If we take a look, though, from this tree towards the forest behind me, you'll see that you have kind of an open park-like character. Even though we've gained a lot of elevation from our time down in the lower ecotone, there's still quite a lot of grasses. This is an open forest, and there's a pretty interesting reason for that. That is because the Ponderosa pine has an interesting relationship to fire. Fire actually comes through these forests pretty frequently, and the way the tree grows shows quite a bit of adaptation to fire. You'll notice that the trees are fairly spread out, that a lot of their lower limbs have been shed. That actually allows frequent low-severity fires to come through, burning the grass, but not actually killing a lot of the trees. In fact, the trees have a pretty thick bark that helps them resist some of that low fire and keeps that fire from climbing higher up into the canopy of the trees. Of course, we also are looking at a really important distinction between south-facing and north-facing slopes. South-facing, or as we might call them, xeric slopes, tend to be drier, tend to have the trees a lot more spread out. Whereas if we look across the way here towards a north-facing slope, you'll end up noticing that the trees are growing a lot more thickly. If we were to go and look a little bit more closely, we'd see that it's not just Ponderosa pine growing on these north-facing or mesic slopes. We're also going to see a lot more Douglas fir and even some aspen poking through. Certainly helps that we're filming this in fall when we see the nice colors. So that's a little bit of a summary of the lower montane zone. Again, this is really dominated by the Ponderosa pine, but seeing in more mesic environments, particularly on those north-facing aspects, some Douglas fir and aspen starting to creep in. So I stopped a little ways further up the road here just because I wanted to give you guys a look at a Douglas fir. Douglas firs are the other really significant species that are living here in the lower montane zone. Both Douglas firs and Ponderosa will live a little bit higher elevation, as we'll soon see. But Doug firs occur primarily in more mesic environments in the lower montane, so particularly north-facing slopes. We're high enough altitude that we're starting to see them even in not entirely north-facing slopes as we see here. This is in contrast to Ponderosa pine, which grow at pretty much all different aspects. Several things to notice about the Douglas fir. You'll see that in contrast to the Ponderosa, here we see each branch or each twig lined with a number of short, flat needles. The other thing to notice is that the cones are pretty distinctive. They have these little tassels on them. I'll break this one off and come in a little closer so you can see it. That's a signature way of telling a Douglas fir.